Now, just a disclaimer about this video. I'm here to have a sit-down, real talk about these two cameras. There are plenty of other comparison videos out there showing you direct comparisons between video footage and photos. So we're just here to talk about these two cameras and decide what camera might be best for you depending on how you take photos or how you shoot video. I'm here to help you get down to it and figure out which camera works best for you for your shooting needs. Now, if you've seen my channel before in the past, you'll know that I mainly shoot with the Sony A7C, and I have shot with the A7IV a couple times. Now, I primarily use these cameras for taking photos. I don't really use them for shooting video all that much, but I know there might be people watching this video who are getting these cameras or trying to choose which one to buy, depending on the video capabilities and the photo capabilities. So we're gonna go over both in this video. But as for photo, it really does not matter which camera you choose. Both cameras are going to produce photo results that are very, very similar. Both cameras have the same autofocus capabilities, maybe slightly improved on the A7IV since it is a slightly newer camera. It's about a year newer than the Sony A7C. But depending on which one you get, it's not really going to matter. It depends on the lens you buy. Now, the A7IV does have 33 megapixels versus the 24 on the Sony A7C, but unless you are planning on cropping in the photos, if you are posting them online on social media. So if you plan on buying one of these cameras for the photos, it really comes down to the ergonomics of the camera. The Sony A7IV is going to be a bit larger, it's going to have a better feel in your hand, you're going to have a better grip of the camera. The Sony A7C is the smallest full frame camera in Sony's lineup. So if you want a smaller, more compact camera for street photography or anything else, a travel camera, something that's easy to throw in a backpack, you might want to choose the Sony A7C. I also forgot to mention an important thing when deciding which camera you should buy comes down to the viewfinder on this camera. The viewfinder on the Sony A7C is really, really small compared to the A7IV. A lot of people do not like the Sony A7C because of the small viewfinder on it. Personally, I don't think it's that much of a problem. I actually have come to enjoy the smaller viewfinder on the Sony A7C because your eye does not have to wander to see the edges of the frame. But maybe if you don't have the best eyesight, you might want to choose the Sony A7IV for that reason. Now, an important factor that you might want to remember for photos and video, the Sony A7IV has a dual card slot, which means you can either have two SD cards in and have twice the amount of photos you can hold on the camera, or you can record your photos and your videos to both SD cards and have a backup just in case one SD card fails. On a side note, I've never had an SD card fail before. If you stick to higher quality SD card brands, you generally don't have anything to worry about, although I did have one instance where I accidentally formatted the SD card before I could get the photos off of the SD card, and I lost all of the photos from a photo shoot I did. So the takeaway from that is, don't be an idiot like me. But in the end, for photo, I could show you guys photos of the A7C, I could show you photos from the A7IV, but you're not going to be able to tell the difference if I do not tell you guys which photos are from which, because both cameras take amazing photos. Now, an instance where you might want to choose the Sony A7IV over the A7C is if you plan on doing a lot of hybrid shooting, so both photo and video taking. Another thing about the Sony A7IV that is really, really nice is it has separate modes for photo and video taking. It's really convenient if you need to switch on the fly. Settings do not carry over, so you can have your designated photo settings and you can have your designated video settings. But the A7C does not take 10-bit 4222 video like the A7IV does. Now, I did not really see the big deal about 10-bit video until I actually shot with 10-bit video. It is a huge difference. When shooting S-Log3 on the Sony A7C, no matter what I did, the footage turned out grainy and it just did not look good, and you could never get the contrast or the colors right in the video. But with 10-bit video, you don't have any issues with that. You can slap on just a basic LUT, a Rec 709 LUT, and convert the video back and it will look absolutely amazing. If you plan on shooting with the A7C, I would probably recommend shooting S-Log2 or Cine 3 or Cine 4 or HLG3. Anything but S-Log3 on the Sony A7C. But once you edit 10-bit footage, you'll never want to go back to 8-bit footage, and I know I can't. Now, on the A7IV, you also have S-Cinetone, which is really nice, but I do not like it as much as S-Log3. S-Cinetone is a color profile where you don't really have to do much grading if you just plan on doing a simple look. Other perks of video on the A7IV is it has active stabilization, which almost acts as like a built-in gimbal for your camera. Now, it does have a small 10% crop, but it's a small price to pay. So if you plan on doing a lot of vlogging possibly, you may want to choose the A7IV because then you don't have to worry about walking as steady. Of course, you still want to, But the A7IV footage, it just looks buttery smooth compared to the A7C, which does not have the best stabilization for video. Now you can always stabilize your footage in post, but you don't want to rely on stabilization in Premiere or DaVinci or Final Cut. Now the one big problem with this camera, it does overheat very, very easily when it comes to video. Now when you get this camera, the factory settings do have it set to turn off when it just starts to get barely warm. So the first thing you need to do when you get this camera, you need to change the settings so you don't have to worry about this camera overheating. Set it to high, and once I did that, I never had to worry about this camera overheating ever again, because me and my wife, we were shooting a wedding recently, and my wife was using the A7IV and she lost some pretty vital, important moments, and the camera turned off and she had to wait for it to turn back on. Now one thing you can do is you can open up the screen, and if you have the screen open, it dissipates the heat more and you don't have to worry about the camera overheating as much. So let me stress that both cameras are fully capable of amazing photo and video options as well. There are picture profiles on this camera that you can color grade that look absolutely amazing. Now, one of the first videos I shot with the Sony A7C right after I got it, I used S-Log3 and the footage turned out terrible. And I felt so bad for the client when I delivered that video. So you really need to be careful. You need to learn how to expose properly with these picture profiles on these cameras. So after telling you all of this, you might be wondering why I choose the Sony A7C over the A7IV when the A7IV seems to be better than the A7C in pretty much every single way. Let me explain. Now, the reason I love this camera so much is primarily because of the ergonomics of the camera. I love the small compact size. As you can tell, I have the smaller 35mm on here, and on the A7IV, I had the 35 G Master on the camera. I was originally carrying the G Master on this camera, but then it just started to feel maybe a little too front heavy. And I used it for a long time, and I still use it occasionally, especially for shooting at night and portraits. But mainly for this camera, I want something small and compact. And just having a camera that I can just walk around and take photos with doesn't look as large or even as professional, honestly, in a way. So just having a camera that doesn't attract as much attention is what makes this camera worth it for me. Not to mention, it just looks really, really cool. It's small, it's super compact. I love the silver model of the Sony A7C. I just think it looks so cool. Now, despite the lack of a dual card slot, I still use this camera for pretty much all of my professional commercial photo taking. Like I mentioned in a lot of my videos, the right gear ultimately comes down to your preference. You don't need to have the best camera, the best lens out there. It ultimately comes down to how you take photos. I know a lot of people that watch my YouTube channel come from the video I made about how the Sony A7C re-sparked my love for photography, and it's really true. Something about this camera I just love shooting with, especially when compared to the A7IV or my old camera, the Sony A7R2. Just the small, compact nature of this camera makes it so much fun to shoot with. I've shot pretty much every kind of photography that you can think of with this camera. I've shot weddings, I've shot real estate, I've shot commercial photos, I've shot portraits, I shoot street photography with this camera. And it does all of those things perfectly, just as well as the A7IV could do. So when it comes down to choosing which of these cameras you want, you can't forget about the price. This camera is about $1,000 more than this camera, and this camera is probably a little harder to find right now since they halted production on it. So if you plan on shooting more video, or if you plan on shooting an equal amount of photos and video, I would probably choose the A7IV. If you don't care about 10-bit video, I would honestly just choose the A7C over the A7IV. 10-bit video is the big deciding factor in this camera. So when you go to buy either one of these cameras, keep the things I've mentioned in this video in mind, and if you have any questions about either of these cameras, please comment down below. I'm happy to answer all of them, and I know there's other people that will be happy to answer anybody's questions as well. So once you've made the decision on which camera to buy, I have a lot of videos on my channel going over different lenses and gear you might want for this camera, specifically the Sony A7C, that might help you out a lot. I also have a lot of other videos on my channel about actually going out and taking photos as well. So if you enjoy those types of videos, go check them out. I'll have a link at the end of this video that you can click on to watch those videos. So if you guys enjoyed this video, please like the video and subscribe. It helps me out a lot and helps me continue growing and reaching a larger audience. And I hope I helped you figure out which camera that you should buy. Go out and shoot.